people on Analysts say that the super luxury real estate market in some parts of Lagos is due for a correction. However, transactions in this segment remain few and far between. And to analyze the Lagos luxury property market, I'm now joined by Dipo Davis, the CEO of Realhouse Communications. He's also which published the Castle's weekly property magazine in Lagos. Thank you so much, Dipo, for joining us. It's great to have you on the show.
My pleasure.
And I want to hear a lot more about this property market. I mean, you've been following it for over a decade. So I want to hear what exactly is going on, particularly with respect to what many people are calling the delay in the correction in the Ikoyi market in particular. We know that's a huge luxury market that a lot of expatriates like to reside in. But do you think that the prices right now make sense, or do you think that that correction is still being delayed?
I think there's several factors, and I think to really understand the market, you have to go back maybe, so I say about 8 years. That was when the Ikoyi market was opened up by the federal government. Before that time, most of the houses there were owned by the government.
Right. And
then the great sell-off happened, and with the sell-off came a serious supply of real estate, luxury real estate. Now what has happened is that the expectation is when there's more supply, naturally prices should be affected. And analysts, I included, are quite surprised that that hasn't happened.
Why do you think that hasn't happened?
I think what you find is that the owners of or the developers of this luxury real estate market, to use, for lack of a better word, I would say they're in a different economy. They don't believe that they cannot achieve the
but they're stuck with some of these property for what, 2-3 years? I think I've seen some property that have been vacant for quite a while.
Some even up to 5 years are still on the market. But somehow or the other, they keep on, and in fact, more are even coming onto the market.
But what money is patient enough to invest in a property that is vacant for 4 or 5 years? I mean, what type of money are we talking about here?
I would like to speculate on where the source of the money is from, because it's something that I would like to have myself. But what we find out, it appears that some form of hot money is coming into the market, and that a fair number of some of the developments might be financed by this. And the result will be that they're just waiting for when they believe the market will pick up.
Do you think this market is going to pick up, though? Because now it seems the Lekki area particularly is becoming an area that appeals to a lot more people these days, and especially when you look at the prices that are a bit prohibitive in Ikoyi, a lot more people going to Lekki. And in fact, what you can build in Lekki is perhaps not the same as what you can build in Ikoyi right now, because I gather that there have been some changes to the law that prohibit people from building certain type of property in Ikoyi. Am I right?
Correct. But in terms of a time frame, I think what will happen is that over time you would see two Ikoyis. You would see should I call it a not luxury market Ikoyi, and then the super luxury Ikoyi, which will be getting the rents of $100,000 and above. But in terms of other areas being a threat to Ikoyi, I don't think so. And a lot has been said about Lekki, which is quite correct, but I think the market is quite different in Lekki. I think Lekki, or the Lekki real estate market, has its own target audience, and I think those people continue to stay in that market. They won't cross over the bridge, despite the fact that it is now quite easy to do so with the link bridge. Yes.
Right. Okay. Let's talk a bit about the yields one gets in investing in a place like Ikoyi. You just talked about $100,000 as the type of rent that some expatriates are paying to stay in the area.
Yes.
But what type of yields are we talking about here? If I'm paying that much as rent, what's the value of the property itself?
Now, for you to achieve $100,000, you'll be looking at the very luxury properties. Typically, Ocean Parade in Banana Island, which is a very exclusive estate in Ikoyi. What we found is that in such estates where there's very high spec property, you can aim for the $100,000 market. But again, it's not just going to fall off a three. You're going to have some lead time before people take up those properties.
But if I was owning that type of property, what type of yield are we talking about? So are we talking about what, 5%, 10%?
Well, in terms of you'll be looking at between 5 to 7% at best.
Right. Doesn't sound like very much.
Well, in Nigeria,
it's probably
no.
better in places like Lekki, I imagine.
Unfortunately, I think statewide you'll find out that yields are not over the 5-6% rate. It's not in that ratio. Yes, because what has happened is that basically there's been a lot of supply all over. In the Lekki market, the mid estates, the estates in that middle region, used to be one before, maybe Victoria Garden City, but a lot of new estates have come up to 6, 7, maybe even up to 10. And all this typically are people who want to rent out. So we've seen that rents vis-a-vis the cost of the properties have also come down. So the margin is not as good as before.
Right, but those expatriates that are propping up the values, do you anticipate that the flow will continue? Do you think that we're going to see that surge going into next year, for instance?
Well, I think it will depend. It will depend on the economy. If the power sector opens up, and telecoms and all the new industries and the new areas, agriculture, attract the companies to Nigeria, the expatriates typically see Ikoyi as the place to stay in. And Nigeria is seen as a bit of a hardship post. So once they bring people into Nigeria, the expatriates, the companies tend to bend over backwards to accommodate their wishes. And Ikoyi still remains the place that people want to stay.
Okay, but let's move away from Ikoyi and let's talk luxury outside Ikoyi right now.
Yes.
What trends are you seeing in for instance, the Lekki area, maybe perhaps some opportunities on the mainland?
Well, on the mainland, if I can start with the mainland, we're looking at...
sticking with luxury now.
Luxury, yes. It's Shonibari Estate in Maryland. That is where you would see luxury, and also in Ikeja.
How do the prices compare with what we are seeing in Lekki, for instance? Are they pretty much in line?
No, in Shonibari Estate, they're higher than Lekki. But there's Ikeja GRA, which also has had the issue that Ikoyi had, which is the government sold off, and all of a sudden there are all kinds of developments coming up. And so the supply, the market hasn't been able to mop up the supply. Yes. So in the mainland, you definitely see Shonibari Estate is what I would advise any developer who wants to do a luxury estates, because it's still limited in scope, and there are very few luxury apartments available. In the Lekki region, we've seen estates like Nikon Town, but those are standalone detached houses, not the luxury condominiums, which may not be as attractive to the expatriate market. But prices there for a house are in the region of 250 million naira.
Right.
Yes.
Let's leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Interesting dynamics going on in Nigeria.